Welcome, wandering soul. You've made it through another day, with all its noise, all its weight, all its unspoken aches. Now the world quiets. The lights dim, and in this hush we whisper. Here we don't rush, we don't judge, we simply listen to stories that echo long after they're told. Some are old as time, some are born from the silence you've carried too long, but all of them are meant for nights like this. So close your eyes if you wish, let the world fade, and let this story find you. This is Whisper of the Night. The weight of work and the unfairness that follows. There was once a girl who worked harder than most, though you wouldn't have noticed her if you passed her by. She never raised her voice, never demanded praise. Her hands spoke for her, blistered, dry, often red from the cold water in which she washed linens before sunrise. Her name was never properly remembered, only referred to as the younger daughter in a house that no longer felt like her own. After her father died, the home she once knew grew cold in more ways than one. Her stepmother took over, a woman with a sharp gaze and a sharper tongue, and her stepsister, soft-palmed and constantly complaining, was shielded from even the lightest of chores. The younger girl was expected to handle everything else: cleaning, spinning, cooking, lifting, serving. Her days were long, her efforts invisible, and her mistakes, however small, never went unpunished. She did not protest. Perhaps she believed that quiet endurance would one day be seen, or maybe, like many who labour silently, she had long accepted that recognition was not a gift promised to the diligent. Her most hated task was spinning. She would sit by the well with a spindle and a heap of tangled wool, her fingers numb as she drew out the thread hour after hour. On one such day, as the wind picked up and her eyes stung with cold, the spindle slipped from her tired fingers and disappeared into the dark water below. Panic seized her chest. It wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol of her responsibility and of her fear. Losing it meant punishment, and punishment came swiftly in that house. Her stepmother's fury was predictable, her voice sharp and cruel. You dropped it, you fetch it. There was no offer of help. No understanding that accidents happen, especially when exhaustion rules the body. Instead, the girl was made to feel like her mistake defined her completely, as if a single slip undid all her labour. Standing at the edge of the well, she looked down at the still water below. She wasn't thinking of drowning. She wasn't thinking of escape. She was simply done. Done trying to explain what it was like to carry weight no one else could see. Done being blamed without defence. Done living in a world where only the loud were protected and the silent punished. So she jumped, not to end anything, but to obey, to comply with what was demanded of her once again. But instead of water, she fell into something else. A strange world, quiet and green, with no harsh voices calling her name. And for the first time in a long time, no one expected anything of her. But that too would change soon enough. She didn't hit the ground when she landed. Or perhaps she did, but it was so soft, so welcoming, that her body barely registered it. There were no bruises, no pain, only a curious warmth pressing up from a field of wildflowers and moss. When she stood, the air smelled like honey and rain. A narrow path wound its way through hills of gold and green. She didn't know where she was, nor why she wasn't afraid. Maybe because for the first time her legs moved without the weight of orders barked behind her. Maybe because silence, when not laced with judgment, can feel like a kind of freedom. As she walked, she heard voices. Not loud ones, not human. The first came from a stone oven, squat and cracked, resting under a tree heavy with shade. The oven was filled with round loaves of bread, their crusts turning deeper brown with each moment. "Take us out, girl," the oven called softly. "We're burning. We're done. No one else is here to do it." She blinked, startled, but didn't hesitate. She found an old wooden peel nearby and carefully removed each loaf, laying them on a cloth-covered rock to cool. The loaves let out a sigh of relief, and the oven murmured its thanks. It didn't ask who she was or why she'd helped. It simply accepted her care. She walked on. Next came an apple tree, its branches bending so low with fruit that they nearly brushed the ground. The apples gleamed like rubies in the afternoon sun, their weight pulling the limbs down painfully. "Please," said the tree, its leaves rustling in quiet desperation. "Pick some of us. We are too heavy. We cannot hold ourselves much longer." Again, she said nothing. She simply reached up and picked until the strain lessened, filling her apron with fruit. She didn't stop until the branches sighed upward, relieved of their burden. And then, as the path turned once more, she came upon a small house tucked into a hedge of snow-coloured roses. It looked cosy but firm. The kind of home that didn't beg you in, but would open its door if you knocked with sincerity. She hadn't expected company. The door opened before she reached it. Out stepped a woman, tall, cloaked in midnight blue, with silver-white hair and eyes as deep and still as the well she had fallen through. "I've been expecting you," said the woman. The girl said nothing, uncertain whether this was kindness or fate dressed as hospitality. "My name is Mistress Holle. If you stay with me and help with my tasks, I will offer you shelter and food. But the work must be done properly. Are you willing?" It wasn't a demand. It was a question. One of the few she had ever been asked where her choice actually mattered. She nodded. Mistress Holle's house was tidy but old, the kind of old that whispers rather than creaks. Each day the girl was asked to sweep, to clean, and most importantly to shake the great feather bed until the feathers flew like snow. "When you shake the bed properly," Holle told her, "it snows in the world above." At first she thought it was a story, but after a few days, as she worked the rhythm into her arms, she noticed the clouds shifting outside, the wind carrying specks of white through the window. She was part of something larger now. And oddly enough, the work didn't feel like a punishment. Perhaps it was because she was finally being seen. Not for her mistakes, but for her effort. No one yelled when she slowed. No one mocked her pace. When she finished a task, Mistress Holle nodded silently and placed warm bread by the fire. When she made a small error, it was corrected without scorn. In this strange world, her labour was not a burden, it was valued. But she also knew, nothing lasts forever. And some part of her, even as she worked with care and ate with comfort, waited for the moment this spell would end. And it would. Not with punishment this time, but with a choice. Culture of quiet labour time in Mistress Holle's world didn't move by clocks or calendars. It passed in the steam of rising bread, the weight of freshly shaken quilts, and the rhythm of tasks done with care. Days flowed like water, not fast, not slow, but steady. And she worked. She swept the wooden floors each morning before the first light broke through the windows. She dusted shelves, lined with jars full of herbs she didn't recognise. She learned to shake the feather beds, not just with force, but with attention. There was a pattern, a feel, a moment when the feathers would lift just right, catching the sun like snowfall in a dream. There was no scolding, no barking orders. But that didn't mean the expectations were low. Mistress Holle watched, always, quietly. Her gaze was not cruel, but it was precise. Like a manager who didn't believe in micromanagement but would notice if the numbers didn't add up. "You missed a corner," she would say, her voice like winter wind against a window pane. Not angry, just truthful. And the girl would nod, return to the broom, and do it again. Not because she feared punishment, but because in this house, work meant something. It wasn't a trap, it was a kind of conversation. You give care and the world responds in kind. At night, they sat by the hearth. Holle didn't talk much, but when she did, it was with purpose. "You think the world rewards effort," she said once, "but it's more complicated than that. Effort without thought is wasted, and thought without care is hollow." The girl didn't reply. She didn't know how, but she remembered those words. There was something almost corporate in this house, not in the soulless, fluorescent way of her old life, but in the quiet structure of it, the consistency, the mutual unspoken contract. You do your part, and so will I. But even in the best workplaces, even under fair management, fatigue grows, not the body, but the spirit. A soft ache that wonders, how long must I stay before it's enough? One morning, while shaking the great quilt that made snow in the world above, she paused. She looked out the window, and she realised she missed her world. Even with its cruelty, even with its injustice, there were things unfinished, people she hadn't yet forgiven, including herself. Later that evening, she turned to Mistress Holle. "I think I should go back," she said, unsure if she was allowed to say such a thing. Holle nodded. "You do? You've been ready for some time. You just needed to realise it." "Will I see you again?" Mistress Holle stood, walked to the door and opened it. "No one ever comes here twice," she said gently, "but everyone carries a part of this place back with them." There was no ceremony, no farewell speech, just the sound of wind shifting and the soft creak of the open threshold. The girl stepped through, and the world turned gold. She didn't fall. There was no splash, no tumble, no blur of stars like before. She simply stepped through the door, and the world shifted, not with violence, but with certainty, like a page turning, like breath returning after a long silence. The sunlight was different here, warmer, familiar. It hit her skin like a forgotten memory, one that had waited patiently to be remembered, and then the gold came. It began softly, a glimmer on her shoulder like pollen in spring. Then more, spilling from the air, from her clothes, from the very steps she took. It coated her hair, her hands, her feet. Not in coins or crowns, but in light, in recognition. The gold wasn't money. It was something older, something deeper. It was worth, not assigned, not granted, revealed. As she walked through the village she had once belonged to, people stared. Some gasped, others whispered, not because she was wealthy now, but because something had changed. Her back no longer bent with apology. Her silence wasn't submission. Her presence filled the space she walked in, not by force, but by right. The stepmother met her at the gate. She stood stunned, eyes wide, lips pressed into a line that held both envy and fear. The girl looked at her and didn't flinch. Not because she had won, but because she had outgrown the fight. Inside the house, the same chores waited. The broom still leaned by the door, the dust still gathered in corners. But the air was different. Or maybe it was just her. Maybe she had carried a season back with her, one that knew how to shake out old things like feathers from a quilt and let the snow fall clean. She didn't brag, she didn't punish, but she didn't shrink either. She spoke when she needed to, asked for what was fair, declined what wasn't. And somehow, without a single confrontation, the entire rhythm of the house changed. Not by demand, but by example. She had become her own Mistress Holle, quiet, firm, just. And though the gold would fade in time, brushed off on clothes, swept from floors, what remained couldn't be seen, only felt. A spine straighter, a voice steadier, a soul no longer asking for permission to take up space. The gold didn't go unnoticed, neither did the change in her. The girl no longer whispered her needs. She didn't flinch when spoken to. She walked through the world as though she belonged, because now she knew she did. And this, more than the shimmer that still clung to her hem, unsettled her stepsister most. The elder daughter had always known her place. It had been padded with pillows, protected by silence, propped up by the sacrifice of others. But now the silence cracked. Now someone else was being seen, being heard, and she hated the sound of it. "How did you do it?" she demanded one evening, arms folded, lips twisted into something between suspicion and greed. The younger girl didn't answer with words. She didn't have to. The story had already been told, in how she stood, in how she no longer served without thanks, in how she met her stepmother's gaze with quiet, unflinching calm. But the elder sister saw only the gold, so she made her plan. One morning, while the younger girl was outside hanging linen in the soft light, the elder daughter tiptoed into the house and grabbed the spindle. She didn't even try to spin, she simply dropped it down the well and cried out dramatically. "Oh no, I've lost it!" she wailed, loud enough for the world to hear. She didn't wait for instructions. She jumped, head first, into the same well she had mocked for years. The water swallowed her. The silence that followed was heavy. And then she too awoke on soft grass, blinking into a strange new sun. She walked the same path. She heard the bread cry out, "Take me out before I burn!" She wrinkled her nose and passed it by. "Not my job," she muttered. She passed the apple tree whose boughs bent low, groaning with fruit. "Shake me! My apples are ready," it pleaded. She scoffed. "Pick your own damn fruit." When she arrived at the small cottage nestled in snow, Mistress Holle opened the door with the same calm, ageless eyes. She studied the new girl, her tapping foot, her impatient glance, her expectant smile. "I suppose you're here to work?" Mistress Holle asked. The elder sister nodded eagerly. "To earn my gold," she added. Mistress Holle said nothing. She simply stepped aside. The work was the same. Ruffle the bedding, tend the hearth, sweep, scrub, carry, fold. The hands that performed it now were sloppy, begrudging. Tasks were rushed, corners skipped. She yawned when she thought no one watched, complained under her breath when she thought someone did. And Mistress Holle, she said nothing. Not a word, not a frown, not even a sigh. She only watched, like snow watches roofs collapse. After a few days, or perhaps a few eternities, the elder sister could no longer bear it. "I've done enough," she said, puffing up her chest. "Where's my reward?" Mistress Holle led her to the same door. "The one that returned you to the world above." The elder daughter grinned. She stepped through it expecting trumpets, a shower of riches, the awestruck gasps of neighbours. What she got was thick, heavy, sticky. Black tar poured from the air above her. It clung to her hair, soaked her clothes, filled her mouth. No matter how she screamed, it coated her sound, dulled it to nothing. It wasn't just punishment, it was exposure. Everything she had hidden behind, charm, pretense, imitation, melted under the weight of her own intent. The village didn't gasp this time. They looked away, not because of the tar, but because they recognized the truth of her. Some truths are heavy, and this one would follow her for the rest of her life. Justice and the weight of integrity. The village talked, of course, they always do. In murmurs, behind doors, over teacups filled not with warmth, but with warning. They talked about the tar, about how it stained not just the girl's skin, but her words, how no matter how she tried to speak, every sentence now dripped with the memory of who she had been when she thought no one was watching. She scrubbed day after day. She tried laughter, tried charm, but the truth clung deeper than she'd ever realized. And that was the true curse. Not the tar, but what it revealed. In contrast, the younger sister lived quietly. She didn't flaunt the gold, didn't seek praise or demand recognition, but somehow everything she touched felt lighter, brighter, warmer. When someone stumbled, she helped. When a task was thankless, she still did it. And people noticed, not in fireworks, but in the way respect slowly replaced pity. No one crowned her, but somehow she stood taller than most. Mistress Holle watched all of this from her window beyond the veil, the soft snowfall her only reply. She had never promised gold, never promised punishment. All she offered reflection, and in that the truest justice was found. Because the world doesn't always reward goodness with riches. It doesn't always punish cruelty with ruin. But what it does, if we let it, is reveal us. Bit by bit, choice by choice, day by day. And that is enough.